Today's reading is short but graphic. We're in Acts 7:54 through chapter 8, verse 3. And it's the stoning of Stephen. And Stephen, you've read about the last couple days. He gave this amazing testimony about what God has done through Israel's history and now in Jesus. The people are outraged, so they kill him by throwing giant rocks on him. It's a bloody, gruesome process. And at the end of that scene where he dies, much the way Jesus did, giving up his spirit, breathing his last with a spirit of forgiveness, we're told there's a man on the outskirts named Saul who's approving of the execution. And if you're reading Acts for the first time, you don't know how Saul will play in yet, but he's significant in this moment because he's a troublemaker. He's overseeing the brutality towards the church, and we find out that persecution just spreads like wildfire after this moment. And as I read this story, this chunk from Acts, it struck me, what if the story ended here? If you're living through this moment, all you're experiencing is the brutal death of someone you admired who was leading you, and then widespread persecution. And what does that feel like in the moment? Are you seized with terror? Do you worry about what will happen to you if people find out? And then I was reminded about a question posed by Andy Stanley, a pastor and writer. He says, when all of this is just a story, what's the story that you want to tell? For the early church in this moment, they're experiencing pain and fear. But what is the story that will be told as we continue in Acts? You'll have to keep reading to find out. But I'm struck because I've read Acts before, maybe you have too. I know that the end of Saul's story is not this moment overseeing this execution. And I know that the end of the church's story is not just huddling in homes afraid of persecution. But I wonder in our own lives if we have that same confidence, that this chapter is not the end of the story. What chapter are you living through right now? Take a moment today and think about what are the circumstances in your life. And one day, when this chapter is just a story, what's the story you want to tell? In the conflict or the transition you're facing, what will you decide today? Because you want to tell a certain story someday. That's what hit me as I read this moment in Acts. It's a moment of deep, deep distress. But that story's not over. It's just one small part, and God is up to something. God will weave parts of the story together in ways only God can do. And I have confidence the same is true in our lives when we surrender and yield to Him. He will weave together threads, people, things that happen, jobs, job losses, these things together. He will weave them to write a different story. Are you yielding to Him in that process? And so I'll leave you once more with this question. When all of this is past and what you're going through right now is just a story, what's the story you want to tell?